Tiburon Island is the largest island in Mexico. It's very hot there. The soil is unsuitable for growing household crops. There are a lot of poisonous animals underfoot, and it is inhabited by a group of Syria nationalities, who have long been considered cannibals. It is also rumored to hide untold ancient wealth, and there are many precious metals under the surface. Arizona's first discoverer of the island and explorer Tom Grindle made his first trip to the island in 1903. Then he only landed to look around and decide whether to organize a full-scale operation to explore the island. Having made his decision, he returned to Arizona to hire assistance. He went to the island on the 10th of June, 1905, promising to return by the end of July. But they never came back. Grindle's brother Edward followed there in September to find out what had happened. When he arrived at the settlement firm which the explorers had left, he received information from hunters that a group of Americans had been killed on the island in the summer. All that's left of them are their hands tied to tall trees. The Seri people bound their captives, depriving them of their strength, gradually eating them in parts and watching them die. Edward Grindle decided that the hands belonged to members of another expedition. In search of his brother, Edward and his small group found the remains of a large number of hands belonging to other would-be researchers. Edward and his fellow travelers found traces of his brother. Tom Grindle's remains were found 2 years later. A pile of bones remained from them, and they were identified by letters that were lying nearby. Half a century later, a friendly expedition went to the island to study these supposedly ferocious people. The researchers found a kind and courteous tribe who sought to share their lifestyle with the visitors. When the expedition tried to find out if the rumors about cannibalism were true, the islanders explained that the Mexican government had set restrictions on their cannibalistic activities, threatening them with death in case of a repeat of the mysterious disappearances of visitors to the island. Maldives is a tropical paradise with white beaches and clear water. This is a picture that the island state shows to tourists. Thilafushi is an artificial island that was created for garbage disposal. It's a good intention, because every week more than 10,000 tourists visit the islands, and this gives a lot of garbage at the exit. The so-called Garbage Island is home to about 150 people, whose job is to sort garbage for further processing. Now more than 330 tons of garbage are brought to the island every day, so garbage sorting has long been forgotten. Unfortunately, this amount of garbage means that most of it is burned. They burn everything: electronics, batteries, and plastic. All this leads to air and ocean pollution. The Northern Fraternal Island was the site of one of the largest human tragedies in New York. On the 15th of June, 1904 year, St. Mark's Lutheran Church held an annual picnic. More than 1,000 people boarded the steamer General Slocum to make the trip from the Lower East Side to the picnic site. There were a lot of women and children on board. While the ship was moving along the East River, it was engulfed by fire, and this is only half an hour after leaving the port. The burning ship was sent to the northern Bratsk Island, which, as the captain considered, was the best option. 1,358 passengers boarded the ship that morning, and 1,021 of them died. To be clear, the only list with a large number of simultaneous victims in the history of the United States is the attack on the World Trade Center. The bodies washed up on the shore of the northern Bratsk Island after the crash, where they were laid out along the pier and coastline. And families wandered among hundreds of charred, drowned bodies in search of relatives. Later, the captain was convicted because no one on the ship observed safety regulations. The fire hoses are rotten. Rescue boats were unloaded at the port. Even the life jackets were useless. They dragged the unfortunate to the bottom when they jumped off the burning ship. Gruinard Island. In 1942, the British government decided that the world's largest power, which they considered themselves, should have all kinds of deadly weapons, and began experimenting with anthrax. So they headed north to an island a few hundred meters off the coast of Scotland. At the end of the 1800th, Gruinard Island was the birthplace of a handful of people, since almost all the inhabitants left the island by 1930. It was decided to use this small island as a laboratory to study the effects of anthrax. A small herd of about 60 sheep was brought to the island, and then an anthrax bomb was dropped. Several bombs were dropped on the island in 1942 and 43. In 1945th year, the owner of Gruinard Island wanted to return his land, but the government considered the island unsuitable for animals or people to live on. Even bigger problems appeared when anthrax-infected corpses began to wash up on the coast of mainland Scotland, thereby infecting other animals. As you understand, the government has never told the residents of the neighboring mainland what they are actually doing on the island. Immediately after that, the island was cleaned in a very dubious way by spraying a compound of water with formaldehyde to kill all the spores. Unfortunately, as soon as the island became safe for habitation, another proposal was received to use the island as a place for storing nuclear waste. The island of San Servalla is located near the coast of Italy. Today, it is a museum of his rather frightening past. The museum used to be a hospital and was intended for wounded soldiers, but in the first half of the 19th century, this institution became a psychiatric hospital. Interestingly, this institution was religious, and it was controlled by the administration of the ancient religious order of San Giovanni, known for its medical experiments. The key methods of treating insane patients were absolute isolation and repression. The order followed a practice they called moral healing. This practice included methods that, by today's standards, border on brutal. The museum displays chains, straitjackets, and handcuffs that were used on patients. In this place, electric shock could be used on a par with an open dialogue between a patient and a doctor. In 1863, a complex of wooden buildings was built on Brown Island. They were supposed to house a federal ammunition laboratory, which was considered too dangerous to be placed in populated areas of mainland Virginia. On the 13th of March, 1863, the inevitable finally happened. An underage Irish immigrant named Mary Ryan was at the center of the explosion. Ryan made a simple but fatal mistake. She tapped the wooden board with the books, creating friction. The explosion destroyed most of the building, in which there were about 100 young women. As a result, 44 died instantly. Mary Ryan herself was in serious condition for several days before she died. The final cause of the tragedy was a combination of books, a wooden board, and the presence of gunpowder in the air. Work at the plant resumed by the end of March after new staff was recruited. During the 15th and 16th centuries, the monastery and settlements on the Solovetsky Islands were filled with monks who chronicled their lives, made salt, and chopped firewood. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the island was gradually transformed into a prison colony. The first people who came here for treason, blasphemy, theft, and vagrancy. And the monks, who still lived on the island, were entrusted with the work of prison chiefs. Ivan the Terrible sent more than 400 prisoners to the island. Later, the prison became a camp, a place of residence for those who were considered a problem. During the Russian Civil War in 1923, the islands became known as a special-purpose camp. In 1937 year, about 2,000 people were killed here. The surviving prisoners described the terrible conditions of detention. The guards used sea hooks to pull dead frozen bodies out of cold buildings. while the prisoners fought to leave the bodies as food. Vitoka Coral Atoll, a breathtaking ring of tropical islands in the Pacific Ocean. There are fewer islands there now than there were before World War II. After the first nuclear tests at Bikini Atoll in 1946 year, Operation Sandstone began, and over the next decades, a total of 43 nuclear bombs were detonated. One of them, codenamed Ivy Mac, was 500 times bigger than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. It completely destroyed the island and the power line beam, leaving absolutely nothing in place of the island, except for a kilometer-long crater. Natsina Island, a deserted, almost uninhabitable river island. It was to this island that 6,200 people were exiled in 1933. These people were sent to a place that later became known as Cannibal Island. They were not provided with dishes, tools, or food. Their only food is soaked flour piled along the shore. Dirty river water was the only source of water, and those who drank it fell ill with dysentery. A handful of people who survived on the island remember the corpses that littered the ground. Human flesh was cut off from the bodies and preserved to be eaten later. Initially, Natsina was planned as a short stop on the way to the final camp, but it lasted a month, and cannibalism began after about 10 days. 40 Island. Soonji was working on his farm in South Korea when the authorities took him away and sent him out of the country to the island of 40. His first task when he got there was cleaning the operating room. It was covered in blood, and in the center, there was a table equipped with chains. He was branded a leper. He was one of many who were exiled to a breathtaking, beautiful island on the south coast of Korea. The beautiful beaches of the island hide a dark past. 40 Island was a leprosarium for more than 100 years while it belonged to the Japanese. But nothing changed when control passed to Korea. Those exiled there were patients and criminals, and their life was a series of cruel labor and repression. Some were left untreated because doctors wanted to study the natural course of the disease. And those who were allowed to marry and have children were forced to send them to the mainland before they reached school age. Those pregnancies that were not approved ended in forced abortions. This island was under the control of the overseers. As recorded in his chronicle, Odin was known for his kindness, but he was an exception to the rule. Another forced residents to bow to his statue every morning before they could eat. Now the island is connected to the mainland by a bridge. But those who live there are still branded as lepers. Even though they were cured of all diseases, many remained disfigured. Today's residents were sent to the island young. And the youngest woman on the island was about 80 at the time of the construction and opening of the bridge in 2007 year. That's it for today. Don't forget to put your thumbs up and subscribe.